The nightmare scenario for college football has arrived, and thank goodness it has. With a smorgasbord of teams fighting for just 4 measly spots in the end one so-called playoffs. We'll update each conference championship, take a look at this week's key games in college, and also the latest in the NFL. As OFN Weekend Review on the Ourlads Football Radio Network starts now. All right, it's Monday, the 13th of November, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, as we update the latest in college football. A lot going on in college football. We still have a little ways to go before we get this involved in the NFL playoff picture. Even though I think it's starting to become kind of like what we expected in the NFL, at least in the AFC, that is. I mean, okay, I'm still not completely convinced that the Patriots are just going to walk their way into the Super Bowl. But Pittsburgh, the Colt game is just another reminder of this team. Seriously. I think we've had the reminders with the Chiefs as well. But you know what? I don't know. I don't know if it matters. I mean, until I've said this for weeks, until I see the chink in the armor from the Eagles, that's the team right now. That's the team that I believe can beat the Patriots. That's the team that I believe. And now with Richard Sherman going down, they're already in a bad situation. I mean, Earl Thomas is banged up. Okay, they got Dwayne Brown in. That's good. Now that was very important. And that's going to be a very serious move for their offense. Not that we've seen a drastic change as far as, the running game, which is really important, and keeping Russell Wilson upright. Okay, but I mean, he got concussed in the game. I don't know. I'm not having a good feeling about Seattle. I mean, we had the one exciting game with Houston that kind of, then the move for Dwayne Brown, and we just kind of figured, all right, watch out for Seattle now. And ever since then, they lose to Washington, and then Richard Sherman goes down. I'm sorry, I can't believe that Seattle can do it now. I just can't, especially now more than ever that New Orleans is getting better each week. I mean, we feel really good about two of our top sleepers, the Saints and the Eagles. The fact that we like them both right now. I mean, how can you not like the Eagles and the Saints for the NFC Championship game as of today? Unless Case Keenum can play like he did on Sunday more often. Okay, that would really change everything. And as great as a game as Case Keenum had, and how can you not feel great for him? Look, we said in the beginning of the year, we've said it for the last year or two, if you remember us talking about it when he was playing with the Texans. We think Case Keenum is a serviceable player. We think he's a top-notch backup, and if he can play more like he did on Sunday, then in this league, he's a starting quarterback. Now, does he have what it takes, though, to win a couple of big games in the postseason when he needs to win the game? See, the defense can probably pull him out a game. But can he's going to have to pull out a game, at least one. And most likely that game's going to have to be in the championship game, probably against a team like the Eagles on the road. Can he do that? And then, okay, remember, this is just not about getting to the Super Bowl. It's about winning it, right? Then let's say he does that. Then can he go to the Super Bowl and have a big game? Because every quarterback has to have a big game in the Super Bowl, unless you have a dominating defense. As good as the Vikings defense is, I don't know if I'd categorize it as, Denver historical, Buccaneer historical, Bears historical. And with no Cook in the backfield, I don't know. I think we're starting to ask a little bit too much. But that's only if Case Keenum doesn't step up even more and play like he did on Sunday. But anyway, I look, the Eagles and the Saints. It was clear in the beginning of the season, before the season began, the reason why we liked them as sleepers was, as we've said before, the Eagles paid their dues last year. Rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, a lot of tough, close losses in situations that really only were because they had a young quarterback and an inexperienced head coach. Because Doug Peterson made a lot of questionable decisions at the end of games last year that lost them games. A lot of them. And so that was a logical step up. Now, they've taken advantage and really jumped out of the gates better than anybody would have thought. But hey, that sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes it just does. And everything's clicking for them. Now, if they can keep this up, still a long way to go. Now, for the Saints, it was all about their defense looking good in the preseason. We knew what Drew Brees could still do. We knew that they were going to have a good running game. So would the defense finally step up, though? And it looked like, because Dennis Allen was able to, he had the luxury of being able to coach some better talent on defense. And it was that talent that you can see. Because, look, we've been big Cameron Jordan fans for years. We love Cameron Jordan. And now, I think this year he's finally going to get the recognition he deserves. But the Alex Okafor move was the big one. Because Okafor was kind of just like he was like a rotation player, and he was, in spurts, he showed you this, he showed you that. But he's really, I think from what I've seen, he's been a really solid player for them. And that secondary, of course. Adding Lattimore, you take a look at the overall talent. They've spent some draft picks in the first round. Like, if you take a look at it over the last, 5 years, 6 years, most of their top draft picks were on defense. And you're not going to always hit it, but they're starting to hit it more and more often, and they're starting to now look like a defense that is serviceable, is decent, is good, and with a elite quarterback and now a better than advertised running game, now all of a sudden you're a dangerous team. Now you are a legit team because you've got now the components. See, if you've got a really good running game and a decent defense to go along with an elite quarterback, you're a Super Bowl contender. You're right there. And this game here was the game that really defined it for me. As much as I liked them as a sleeper, as a playoff team, that they were going to do well, and nobody thought they were, and I feel proud of that. Fact is, even just a couple weeks ago, I don't really think they're going to win a Super Bowl, though. But now I believe that can happen. And I think another thing that sometimes, and this goes to college too, is when we move over to college, sometimes we have too high a standard for football. Because we've seen some really great teams in the past. And I'm not even talking about 20 years ago. I'm just talking about just a couple of years ago. But we're not seeing that this year. We know that this year's Patriots are not last year's Patriots. And yet they're still kind of the benchmark. So that right there should be proof that the league is kind of, it's not. Didn't we see this in the beginning of the season? Everybody said, that's because of the practice. They're not practicing enough in the offseason. Now, is that still the reason? I think by now that would have to no longer be the reason. So I don't know. Is it coaching? Because the coaching isn't very good. We know that. Just take a look at Denver. We said it last week. Seriously. After the game last night, should Vance Joseph still be coaching this team? No. I know they're probably not going to fire him, but they should. What are you waiting for? It's a disaster. The coaching is terrible in Denver. The coaching is terrible in Tampa Bay, as we've said for 2 years. The coaching is pretty bad all throughout. There's a lot of bad coaches. There's even bad coaching on halfway decent teams. But that's something that we won't recognize until some of those halfway decent teams get to the postseason. And then that's when we'll see, oh, yeah, so-and-so's coaching. Did we really think they were going to go that far? So I think that's where another edge a team like the Vikings have. Mike Zimmer's a good coach. I think there are more quality teams right now that I believe in the NFC, with the Vikings, with the Saints, with the Eagles. And I'm not going to throw Seattle out just yet, but Earl Thomas better be healthy. Because if they were to lose Earl Thomas with Sherman, they're done. Then forget it. And I'm not sold that Mike Tomlin's going to win another Super Bowl. I'm still, there's something about that team. I'm not believing in them yet. Same thing like the Chiefs. I can't believe in them yet. That's why I actually thought Houston was going to have a good chance with Deshaun Watson to do something in the postseason. I really did, but that's out the window. So I don't know. I mean, you look at the AFC and okay, the Jacksonville story is nice, and what happened yesterday, and they used to lose games like that. It's a nice little story. Good for them. That's a happy thing. That's good for the sport. And you know what? It might be Jacksonville and Tennessee in the playoffs, if you can believe it. Who would have thought that? 2 teams from the South. That's because right now, unless Baltimore wakes up and figures things out and gets healthy, because that's what they got to do. They got to get healthy. Maybe they come off the bye, they start playing better. That's still a possibility. But the Bills are starting to finally. I mean, they're waking up now. Let's just put it there. That's why a few weeks ago I remember I kept saying, how is this team winning? And now we know. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is not a starting quarterback. I'm sorry, he's not. I mean, if he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, then he's what? He's 30th, 31st, 32nd. That's really what he is. He's not going to win you games. You're not going to be a winning team in the NFL with Tyrod Taylor. And you know why I know that? Because the Bills have a decent defense and a good running game. So what else do you want? We just talked about that with Drew Brees. What do you want, Tyrod Taylor? Okay, I know you may want some better receivers, but Charles Clay came back. Kelvin Benjamin's there. You do have Jordan Matthews. I'm sorry, but it's Tyrod Taylor. So they're not going to go to there's going to be one team in the East, unless Baltimore wakes up after the bye, one team from the North. I don't even know what to expect in the West, because unless the Raiders wake up, which could happen. They did win. They go to the bye. Maybe that'll get them going. We know the Chiefs are going to get there. That's why I'm saying we're probably going to get 2 teams from the South and maybe the Raiders. I mean, it probably makes sense that the Raiders would be the team that second team in the West. But really, I mean, unless they end their season winning whatever 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 8, are we really sold that the Raiders are going to do anything based on how they've looked so far? I'm having a hard time believing that team will change that much that fast. There's been no proof of that in the past for me to go with. That's why we're stuck with the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Patriots as realistic teams. I mean, seriously, Doug Marrone and Mike Mularkey, those are your 2 coaches on your AFC South playoff teams? Come on now. Come on. I mean, look, the Jags, though, they're in good shape moving forward. With Tom Coughlin there, with that defense, I tell you what they need to do. What they need to do, though, is either in free agency or the draft, get another running back. I think they need another running back. I've said it last year around draft time. I was always concerned about Leonard Fournette, and I'm still concerned about Leonard Fournette. How can you not be? You can't when you're building a team to run the football, which Coughlin's going to want to do. They better get. I'm not saying draft a high pick. Just get somebody in the 4th or 5th round. You can always get those running backs. Get another running back there, just in case Fournette has his wig out weeks. You can't afford it. And we all know the Jags. I mean, the Jags, the way they are right now, they could probably trade next year's first rounder, this year's first rounder, and another pick or 2 to move up to get a quarterback. And I don't think anybody would question that, because that's what they have to do. That's really what's left for them now. That's how close they are. I'm telling you, if Darnold comes out, see, as a Jet fan, I really want Darnold to come out now, because it's like, if he doesn't come out, then there's only, say, and Rosen should come out, then there's only 4 quarterbacks, and you need the 5th, because so many teams need quarterbacks. Even teams you don't normally think about, like the Jags are going to be in the postseason, but they got to get a quarterback. Pittsburgh needs the next quarterback for Roethlisberger. The Giants need the next quarterback for Eli. Cleveland desperately needs a quarterback. Jets desperately need a quarterback. Bills desperately need a quarterback. I mean, Arizona, they got to get a quarterback. Remember I said 2 years ago when Dak Prescott came out to take Dak Prescott in the first round, I said. That was my pick. Dak Prescott, end of the first round. Arizona, think about your future. And who did they go with? Kimdichie. How's that working out? But they need a quarterback. But another team that needs a head coach, we all know, is McCarthy. Now they finally won a game without Aaron Rodgers, and they're having this big celebration with Hundley like he's won the Super Bowl or something. How weak is it to be a Bears fan and you lose to the Packers all the time, and then Aaron Rodgers is out, and here you got your chance to beat them? I don't care that you got a rookie. I mean, Trubisky threw for 300 yards, for crying out loud. And you couldn't, and the top 2 running backs got hurt for the Packers, and you couldn't beat them. Oh, that would be devastating. That would devastate me if I was a fan. And you know what? The Colts may need another quarterback. Who knows? I mean, can they really trust Luck? Unless they believe Brissett's going to be a starting quarterback, which I don't think they can do that. Oh, the quarterbacks are needed all over the NFL. Quarterbacks and head coaches. And the Cowboys lose. Why did the Cowboys lose? It wasn't because of Ezekiel Elliott. It's because when you take out Ezekiel Elliott, Tyron Smith, and Sean Lee, you are going to lose. And this is also why I've made this. I've talked about Dak Prescott before. Dak Prescott's a nice quarterback. I just told you I wanted him in the first round. He got drafted in the 4th. But Dak Prescott is never going to be that type of wow quarterback, that superstar quarterback. Dak Prescott's always going to need help. And when he gets the help, I mean, he's not even going to be Russell Wilson. He gets the help, and it's going to make him that much better. But he's going to be an above average quarterback when he's got the help. So just getting the help doesn't always make you a real good quarterback. But for Prescott, he's always going to be a good quarterback. He's always going to be a good quarterback. When he doesn't get the help, like we said yesterday, you saw what happened yesterday. When he gets the help, he's going to be really good. And if he would have had a mixture of the two yesterday, then you probably would have saw a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. But you completely took everything away from him. You took his left tackle, which meant he was completely harassed the whole game, which, by the way, we mentioned this in the beginning of the season as well. We told you the Dallas Cowboy offensive line from week 1 was no longer an elite offensive line. And it was because they had to play a couple of guys on the line that really weren't very good. They had 3 really good players and 2 big sore spots. So when one of those really good players goes down, now you have 3 sore spots. And that's why it became a disaster yesterday. Now, I don't know what to think about Atlanta. Is this a turnaround game from Atlanta? Way too early for that. Way too early. Because really all they did was benefit more on defense and offense because the Cowboys were without Smith and Elliott. That's really it. Definitely give them credit. It's the best game they played all year, but you had to think about it also from what took place in the game and what wasn't there. But hey, maybe the confidence is really all they needed out of that, because the confidence is really what's been their Achilles heel all season, and of course Steve Sarkisian. All right, now let's talk college. A lot to go on here, so let's get to it. The playoff system, this N1 game, this is great the way this is working out this year, because already we are about to see a situation when we get down to it, unless by some miracle they get lucky and it becomes obvious who the four teams are. I don't know how that's even possible right now. I mean, let me think about how it could be possible. Alabama beats Auburn. Alabama beats Georgia. Alabama's in. Clemson or Miami wins out. That's 2 teams. Oklahoma wins out. That's 3 teams. And Wisconsin wins out. That's 4 teams. There you go. That's the easy way. Now, do you really think that's what's going to happen? But that's the easy way. But we could also get a lot of chaos. Because, but here's the thing too. It's not just the chaos, it's the reality of things. No matter how simple it kind of looks, the fact is the average person understands that the more, remember I said this a couple years ago, sooner or later we're going to get to a point where any team that can go undefeated before their playoff situation, it's going to almost be a minor miracle. And more often than not, it'll only be because their schedule was extremely easy and laid out perfectly for them. See, right now, if you look at Miami's schedule, the thing it hasn't been completely easy, but it has laid out perfectly, because their toughest road game was with Florida State, and of course we saw what happened with them with a freshman quarterback. Then they played their toughest game at home against Notre Dame, and they won't have another tough game until the championship game. So really, it would have worked out as perfectly as possible for them to be in that situation, to go undefeated. Because again, Miami will not be in the playoffs unless they go undefeated. But more than likely, you're going to lose a game. And now I think we're starting to see there are going to be seasons where teams are going to lose twice. And then you're going to get a bunch of other situations where you're going to get so many teams losing once that it's just becoming, I don't even know what to think. And last week, remember when we told you how don't listen to anybody, what did we say? That we were 100%, not 99.9%, 100% sure, as of last week, that if Wisconsin went undefeated, that they would be in the playoffs. And 1 week later, they're now in the poll, not the playoff poll, but in the poll, they're now 5th, which means they're in, because Clemson or Miami will lose. So what did I say? So don't listen to these people that to bring up this crazy nonsense about an undefeated Big Ten team not going to the playoffs. It's just silliness. But let's start with, I'll tell you what, let's start at the top. Alabama is number 1. And Alabama, if anything, proved once again that they're not last year's Alabama. They're vulnerable. Throw in the fact they had key player out, their top linebacker. And they basically were in a situation where they were lucky that they weren't playing a playoff team. They would have lost. But they played a good team, on the road. I mean, the way it went was almost exactly what we thought it would go. That it was going to be a close game. Remember we said chances are that game could have been tougher than the Auburn game. And maybe it could be. We have no idea if that Auburn game is going to be any different. We really don't. I mean, right now, it sure does. But we weren't really, we didn't know how much Auburn was going to grow up last week. We'll get to that in a second. But with Alabama, they're vulnerable. It's so obvious they're vulnerable. The thing they have, though, is they still have a decent defense, but they have to stay healthy. They've got to get this linebacker on the field. Having him out is just it's not good, especially when they have to step up in competition. And Hurts is just not going to be able to bail them out against the top teams. He can sit there in the post game and act cocky and say ride my back or whatever. But come on, I mean, you beat Mississippi State, so stop. And he was 10 of 19. I mean, stop. I mean, and Calvin Ridley was the big guy. We said this last week. I mean, this is what Alabama has. They got 3 or 4 guys. That's it. And on offense, really, and the main guy, and the main 2 really were the guys that came through for him when they needed him. Hurst, who has shown the ability to come up in pressure situations, did it again, and Calvin Ridley had a big game. That was probably the best I've seen Calvin Ridley play. Big time player. Not Amari Cooper, but then again, I'm not sure that's saying much kind of season he's having. But a big game for Calvin Ridley. And Alabama squeaks by. Now, what does that do, though? How have things changed with the Auburn game? Now, I haven't seen the futures yet. We'll talk more about that in a few days. But there is absolutely no question that because you're going to get decent future odds in Auburn right now. You should be getting about 15 to 20 to 1 odds. You should be. And if you get them, go ahead and take them. Here's why. I'm not changing my mind at all about Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett Stidham, still, you saw in the first half of that game, you put a little pressure on him, he's going to buckle. The reason why Stidham can have a good game is because they're able to run the ball. Kerryon Johnson, who's the best player on that team, had 167 yards rushing, 67 yards receiving. He had over 200 and almost 230 yards total offense and a touchdown. Throw in the fact that they've got Ourlads' top place kicker, Daniel Carson, who's money, and he was clutch. He was 4 for 4. He's a machine for them. And the defense, which we did not argue, was as good as any defense out there. That defense won them that game, the defense in the running game. And if you can protect Stidham enough with the running game, that will give them a chance, just like the way Alabama won a couple of years ago with Jay Coker. Because Coker was nothing at this time of the season 2 years ago. Nothing. 3 years ago, whenever it was. There is no way you could imagine Alabama winning a championship with Jay Coker. But they did it because they had the Heisman winner running the ball, and they had a fantastic defense. And that gave him an opportunity to sit in the pocket a little bit more, feel a little bit more comfortable, get a little bit more confidence, make a few plays here and there. Now, I still don't see that Auburn has enough talent in receiving department. They don't have any big guys they can go to. It's just Kerryon Johnson now. That's all it is. It's Kerryon Johnson and a really good defense. See, Auburn. I'm saying go ahead and think about Auburn for future's sake, and I'm only saying that because you're going to get good odds, and that's it because they got a shot. And anytime you get a realistic shot, you do it. I'm not saying they're winning it because they have to beat Alabama, then they got to beat Georgia again. Then they go to the playoff situation and win 2 of those games. So they're going to have to win after beating Georgia. Let's count that twice. 5 premier games in a row. Not in a row, but 5 premier games. They're going to have to beat Georgia twice, Alabama, 2 playoff teams. I don't think with Kerryon Johnson and a really great defense you can do that. You need to have a little bit of something else. Now, is Daniel Carson enough? I don't know. Maybe he counts. But then again, maybe you're getting 20 to 1 and it's worth a 20 to 1 shot. I'm not telling you to take them if they're 5 to 1. But the defense that shut down Georgia's running game and forced Fromm to try to beat him if he could, and he can't. And this is what we talked about. Okay? Remember, we went over the situation about there's a chance that Georgia is going to lose a game because everybody loses. And I also said if Georgia's going to lose a game, lose to Auburn. So this is, sure, you don't want to lose the way you lost, but this is going to happen. So, all right, you lose. Fine. Georgia's going to win. Well, they should win. The schedule is not that difficult. Kentucky, Georgia Tech, you win those games, even though the Georgia Tech game won't be easy, especially if you still have a freshman quarterback, which this is still something that I would still think about. Look, I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but now that Kirby Smart has got a decision to think about, I really think that he's got to have that ready He can't lose the season if they get into a situation against Georgia Tech or, say, Auburn or Alabama in the SEC championship game. If at halftime they're losing like 14-3 and Fromm isn't playing well, he's got to be ready to pull the trigger. He has to do it. And this is no knock on Fromm. The kid is a freshman, and he's playing in one of the toughest conferences in football, and he went up against one of the best defenses in football, and he's a kid. This is no knock on Fromm. It's just that Eason is a little bit more prepared, and I don't think Eason's a bad quarterback. I mean, there's no way Eason is going to stay with Georgia if Fromm struggles and he doesn't get a chance to play, and he kind of and that's going to be right there. He's going to know by next year, I'm never going to get a fair shot here, because he apparently is going to stick with Fromm. Then okay, that's fine. He's a good quarterback. He's going to be a very good quarterback for this team in this program. I got to go somewhere else. There are too many bad quarterback situations in college football for Eason to be sitting on the bench at Georgia. So that is something, though, that you would hope that, okay, maybe Georgia can pull an Auburn against either Auburn or Alabama in the SEC championship game, meaning maybe their defense does the bullying, their running game gets going. See, I'm not willing to sit here and go, oh, well, after what I saw there, I mean, Auburn, if they play Georgia again, Auburn's going to kick their butt in the SEC championship game. There's no way. I would think that. Now, I'll say this, though. I'd feel a lot better. I know they didn't lose that game because of Fromm, but I just would feel a lot better if Eason was there, because it's just a little bit more of a veteran presence in that quarterback position is going to help them. It's just logical. As long as Eason is a good quarterback, which I think he is, I just think he'd be more prepared for it. Now, maybe Fromm can come out in the next 2 weeks. Maybe he can use this if he winds up playing. This will be an opportunity for him to show, hey, you know what? I've got that behind me. I've learned a lot in that game, and have him kind of move forward, go one step back, 2 or 3 steps forward. So when they play in the SEC championship game, he is going to be really ready to go and elevate his game. And it could happen. Georgia just had a bad day at the office, and I've said this many times. Why is it that in college football you have one bad game look at teams in the NFL. They have bad weeks all the time. Even the Patriots got beat up by the Chiefs on opening day. So when does that mean that Patriots lost to the Chiefs on opening day? They got blown out. Only way they're going to the playoffs now, they're going to have to win out. I mean, come on. That is totally unfair the way this works in college football. You have one bad game and you're kind of crippled the rest of the way. But Georgia doesn't have that crippled problem, because this, as we've said going into last week, they can lose this game, they can run the table and win the national championship. Problem is, the way that they lost now gives you a little bit of pause. What happened there? Why? But there are some things that if you watch the game, it wasn't like they got completely from the beginning to the end of the game, they were totally outclassed. That did not happen. There were several important parts of that game that Georgia just completely mentally fell apart. There were several situations that occurred in that game where Georgia, I mean, they had made dumb mental error play after dumb mental error play. And it was all those mental errors, throw the pressure of being number one, on the road against a good team and a really good defense, throw in you've got a freshman quarterback in a big spot on the road for the first time in his career in that environment. All of those things just weighing on that team, and you got what you got. But remember, if there's a rematch, that's on a neutral field. So if Auburn gets a little momentum going, it doesn't seem like an avalanche because they're not at home. So Georgia is still a true national championship contender. Just one bad day at the office. Will they forget about it? And, I still believe that if they can wipe out the mental errors and use this as a learning experience, they'll be fine. Because again, to me, that's all that was. It was mental errors, inexperience, pressure, all of that. If they grow from that, they'll be fine. But we can only guess. That's all you can do is guess. Nobody knows. They're kids. That's what's fun about college football. As far as Miami, nobody saw the blowout coming on both ends. Great performance by Miami's defense. Manny Diaz, Mark Richt. How many times do I have to tell you about their coaching staff? And very smart. We're gonna do what we can to shut down that running game. We're gonna force Brandon Wimbush to have a good game. And early on, he was making a couple decent throws. Everything looked fine. But then all of a sudden, off a little here, off a little there, and it just fell apart real fast for him. And that's the difference. That's the thing with Notre Dame right now, is that they were just too one-dimensional. And they just had nothing going at all that they can count on in the passing game when Wimbush isn't throwing the ball accurately. So if you shut down the running game for Notre Dame and you force them to pass the ball, see, it's sort of like with Alabama. If you have a really good defense, you could force, like, say, Jalen Hurts to beat you. Well, you know what? He may not have a great game, but he doesn't throw the ball away. He doesn't give up turnovers. And as long as you're hanging in, you hang in there long enough, he can make some plays at the end of the game to win them for you. But Wimbush hasn't been able to do that. That's trust me, I'm not putting Hurts in some sort of mega Heisman area, but Wimbush hasn't even been anywhere near that. He's not even Hurts. So that was just a big killer for them. And for Miami, though, on the flip side, it was just the way the season's gone, mentally getting stronger every week, winning these close games. Remember I said last week, maybe if they win this Notre Dame game, we would see this gradual situation where they up their game at the right time against a better Virginia Tech team, and then they even play a better Notre Dame team. And not only do they up their game there, they even play better. So this Miami team is getting better and better and better. But still, in a couple of years ago, this team, Miami, they would have lost twice already. But like I said before, you have to not think about this particular college football season like you did a couple of seasons ago, or even last year for that matter. This is just, we said this during the offseason and the draft. You have all of these players that have left early over the last 3 or 4 years in college. This is what's going to happen. Eventually, you get this, where the talent level has been watered down so much at this level that you get craziness. You get a lot of parity, and then you get teams that, like Miami, that in normal years would be top 10, maybe. That would be a highlight. That's actually sitting there with a chance for playoffs. But that's the way, that's what they're in right now. That's the season we're in right now, and that's why you can't think of it as, but come on, they're not really, but hey, this year with the teams that they're playing, they are. They're in there. Now, do I think that if Miami's got to go up against some of those other teams that, like for instance, I got to say it, I think they go up against Alabama. See, Alabama, I don't know. That's still tricky. I think Alabama's got to be healthy. That's if they're not healthy, they're definitely, Miami can beat an Alabama. But the teams right now, I couldn't see Miami beating Auburn. Auburn's win. 2 teams blew out teams on Saturday. Auburn blew out Georgia. Miami blew out Notre Dame. To me, it wasn't even that close. Who was the more impressive? It was Auburn. So, and that's a team with 2 losses, and Miami's got none. All right, so that's the point right there. That, come on, everybody knows that if Auburn plays Miami, that the best Miami can hope for is 50% of the time they're going to win, 50% of the time they're going to lose. And yet, in the system that we have, Auburn could be shut out of the playoffs, and Miami would be there. And that's with 4 teams. But that's what we're in. But the way it is right now, we're going to have Miami against Clemson. They're already set. They're playing the ACC championship game. The question is now, will Miami stumble at all against Virginia or Pitt? Unlikely, but we'll see. It only takes one game. Also, the pressure. The pressure, you never know about the pressure. You never know. Now, I don't anticipate we'll see that this week against Virginia at home. But next week, they go on the road. Even though Pittsburgh's not a very good team, it's a road game. And all of a sudden now you've got a little bit of pressure. You win this game. You're in the ACC championship game for a chance. No, they're already in anyway, but we're in the ACC championship game undefeated for a chance at the playoffs. So if there'll be more pressure in Miami probably in that game than in the Clemson game. Because in the Clemson game, Clemson will probably be favored. Even though I'll tell you right now, I pick Miami. I don't know what the odds are. I think Clemson would be favored right now, but I'll tell you right now, I pick Miami. Now, remember, I said it last week before that Clemson-Florida State game, even though Clemson covered, they had no right covering. They should have put Florida State away early. They had them down because Florida State had, as we said this going in, they had nothing. That their offense was not going to be able to move the ball, and they didn't. Blackman was 13 of 32. But they just hung around because it was still, the score was only 17-0, and before you knew it, play here or play there, and it's 17-14 with 8 minutes to go. What in the world is going on here? But then all of a sudden, bang it a boom, and it's 31-14. So it got close for a second, like 5 seconds, and then that was it. But still, that was a bad Florida State team. And the problem is Bryant is not Watson, and Clemson is there's just no way. I already have Clemson. I think I have him in my futures, but there's no way would I tell you to take Clemson now. There's no way Clemson's going to win the national championship right now. I'd have to see some sort of marked improvement from Bryant, especially in the championship, the ACC championship game, for me to believe going into the playoffs. If they win that game and he's real impressive and it's the game of his career, all right, they got a shot. But right now, I don't see it. Right now, I would pick Miami to beat Clemson. And I'm not even just saying that. I mean, I am real about that. I am 100%. And you know me, I picked Clemson last year. So if I'm not going. I mean, if I go against Clemson, that there's a reason for that because I'm really believing in this Miami team enough to beat Clemson because I just this Clemson offense is just not, and the Clemson defense has been good, but now this Miami defense is playing well, and yet I trust Miami's offense more than I do Clemson's. Now, I'm not saying, I got Miami, and I think Miami's going to blow them out. I just think that right now, I would take Miami to win in a close game. That's it. That's all that is. So remember, one team out of those 4 in the AP poll, out of those top 4 is getting in. Okay? Now, Oklahoma got the big win over TCU, so we felt good about that. Kenny Hill played the type of game we expected him to play in a big game. He did not come up with enough plays. When you're playing Oklahoma's defense, you got to come up with more than 20 points. Rodney Anderson, by the way, is the next superstar running back for the Sooners. What an incredible game he had. 4 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 2 receiving. I mean, he's a stud. We talked about him 2 weeks ago. So that is making Baker Mayfield's life that much easier. And if their defense can play a little bit, watch out. So Oklahoma now, if you take a look at the Big 12, Oklahoma, the way it's set up right now, it's pretty straightforward with Oklahoma. All right, so let's say, Oklahoma's going to be in the Big 12 championship game. Who are they playing? Well, if TCU beats Texas Tech and Baylor, which they probably will, not to say that those games will be easy, because TCU is all of a sudden starting to lose games. But let's say they win the games they're supposed to. They'll face Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. It's that simple. And that's probably what's going to happen. Now, if Oklahoma State winds up beating Kansas State and Kansas, and TCU loses to either Texas Tech or Baylor, then we get an Oklahoma State-Oklahoma rematch. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I really believe TCU is definitely going to play and win. The Texas Tech game is not, like I said, that's not going to be easy. They should win, but it's not going to be easy. And the Baylor game, Baylor hasn't really had their moment yet. Maybe they'll have their moment, but the chances are the best shot is going to be this week because it's going to be at Texas Tech. So, and it is going to follow the Oklahoma game. So I would give Texas Tech a puncher's chance in this game to pull off the upset And if that were to happen, then we could have a Bedlam rematch in the inaugural Big 12 championship game. So wouldn't surprise me at all to see Texas Tech upset TCU this week at home. And then we'd go for the Big 12. But I don't think it's going to matter anyway for Oklahoma. They're proven right now they're the best team in the class of this conference. You will see Oklahoma in the playoffs. So I think right now with Miami and Clemson, I think you're going to see Miami in and Oklahoma in. Now, as far as Alabama, I don't think they're getting in. I just don't. I don't think this team's going to do it this year. I think you're either going to see Auburn beating them. Don't forget, that game's at Auburn. So I think Auburn's either going to beat them or they get in and somehow Georgia will find a way to beat them. My gut tells me you're going to see Auburn and Georgia in a rematch in the SEC championship game. That's what my gut tells me. And I hope for Georgia's sake, they're a little bit more prepared this time to win that game. Now, is there a chance that Auburn wins with 2 losses and gets shut out? Remember, we said this about a month ago that Auburn could still get there with 2 losses because of this exact scenario. We told you after the LSU game, actually. We told you that don't worry. If you're an Auburn fan, you can still get to the playoffs because are they really going to knock you out if you're a 2-loss SEC team? Probably not. It would take a really crazy scenario. So how would it work? Could it work? Right now, no. And here's why. Because if you look at it, if the only way that it would happen, here's the only way it could happen, would be if Auburn beats Alabama and somehow Auburn was still ranked behind Alabama. I don't see that happening now. But because remember, because the difference between last year's situation with Penn State and Ohio State definitely had to do with the rankings more than anything. See, Auburn and Alabama are in a different situation with the rankings. Auburn's already 6, so I can't imagine that if Auburn beats them. See, the other thing too is it kind of happened for this situation. It would happen at the very last game of the season. I can't see it, but you never know. I mean, just imagine the outcry if Auburn beats Alabama and somehow Alabama remains ranked ahead of Auburn because they got 1 loss and Auburn has 2. I mean, maybe that depends on the game. What if Auburn beats Alabama 20-17 in overtime? The people in the committee people, they're pretty crazy about these Alabama, Ohio State teams. We saw it last year. They may just say, hey, it was in Auburn. It was an overtime game. It was a flip of the coin. One play decided it. Alabama has 1 loss. Auburn has 2. We're going to rank Alabama 4 and Auburn 5. It could happen. It could happen. So that, I guess, would be the only way that could happen, that Auburn couldn't get in. But Alabama would still get in, of course. So it's not like they would not take an SEC team. So I guess the answer to that question is there's no way an SEC team won't be in the playoffs this year. All right, and part of that is because Ohio State does have 2 losses. So because of Ohio State's 2 losses, there's no way that because Auburn's already ranked ahead of Ohio State with 2 losses. So there's no way Ohio State can pass Auburn right now. And Notre Dame's got 2 losses. So all those teams. See, Auburn's in much better situation now because all these other teams got 2 losses. That's the other thing, too. That worked out for them. The Ohio State loss really worked out for them. All right, so because, look, you got, 3 SEC teams in the last 7. So, of course, one of them is going to get into the Final Four. So I think you're going to Miami, Oklahoma, and then, again, the SEC champ. Now, here's another thing. Can we get the 2 SEC teams, which we talked about last week? Yeah, let's say Wisconsin loses. Maybe they lose to Michigan this week, or maybe they lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So what happens there? Yeah, you absolutely could get 2 teams in. What's the best scenario for that? Best scenario for that could wind up being, I don't know. They'd be kind of tricky. I don't know if there is a good scenario. Maybe. Well, it would you definitely want Alabama. Probably be Alabama losing. That would be the best situation. If you want 2 SEC teams in, you want Auburn Actually, probably what you want is Georgia beating Alabama in the SEC championship game. All right, if Georgia beats Alabama, that's the easiest road that I could see for two SEC champions, two SEC teams in the playoffs. Because Alabama would have one loss. There's no way Ohio State's passing them. Again, there's no way Wisconsin's going to pass them. They're going to already lose under this scenario. Georgia will also get in because they win the SEC championship. That's how you do it. So in that situation, it would then be, again, if I have Miami and Oklahoma in and Wisconsin loses, then it could be Georgia, Alabama, Miami, and Oklahoma. Which, by the way, I think last week is what I said, right? No, what did I say last week? I said Notre Dame was in because I had Notre Dame over Miami. But since that's out of the table, I'm going to switch it with Miami. I don't know, but I'm not going to go with. I'm not going to go with Alabama in that scenario. So, at this point in time, I am going to go with Wisconsin. So I'm going to go. I mean, they were my sleeper anyway. Actually, almost 6 weeks ago. So I think Wisconsin. Their defense is looking really good right now. I don't care that Hornibrook threw the 3 interceptions. Part of that is definitely because the receivers are just all banged up right now. But I just don't think it really was necessary. I think Hornibrook kind of forced some of those balls. And some of them were kind of 50-50 balls. So I'm not worried about that. The defense was so dominant. That is so important because they've got that situation that you want that we just talked about. They've got that great running game with Taylor. They've got the really good defense, and Hornibrook is good enough. Problem is they can't count on Fumagalli, the tight end, all day long. That's going to hurt them. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you they're going to win the national championship, and part of that is because they just don't have enough of a passing game. That's the same problem I think that Auburn's going to have. Very identical team situations. But even though Michigan's my team, I have no reason to think Michigan's going to – I can't see Michigan competing with Wisconsin. I did not see enough out of Brandon Peters. I think that they just have – I think it's also a combination of the fact that Peters is so young and inexperienced, and he just doesn't have a veteran receiving core. So there's just too much inexperience in that offense. Higdon's done a tremendous job running the football. They're doing a tremendous job running the football. But Wisconsin's a really good defense, and so is Michigan's. So that's how Michigan's going to win this game. If they're going to win it, they're going to have to – that defense is going to have to just bear down, and they're going to have to make sure that it is a dirty, ugly, low-scoring game. And maybe turnovers decide the game, field position, field goals, that kind of thing. That's the kind of game it's going to have to be for Michigan. And that's a game it could be. But I just think Wisconsin's going to beat them. And that's how I'm thinking of it Monday. Going to Minnesota, win that game. And I do think Wisconsin playing Ohio State will beat Ohio State. Now, part of that is because I think when Ohio State gets to the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, Ohio State's going to be favored probably by a touchdown or 10 points. And that'll be right back into the same situation that we've been in with this team, that when everybody expects them to win and it's big bad Ohio State doesn't come through. See, now this past week, even though they were favored and everything like that, fact is after the way they lost against Iowa, everybody, we all dismissed Ohio State, and they're not going to be a playoff team, and just let's dismiss them. When you dismiss Ohio State, they come up with their best performances. But by time they would get to the Big Ten championship game, now that's as long as they beat Michigan, and they have no scars on the way there. Then they're going to be pumped up, and everybody's going, Ohio State this, and 7-10, 14-point favorite. And then, yes, I would be all over Wisconsin there. Now, Ohio State's going to get into the Big Ten championship game because they're going to beat Illinois. When they do that, they're going to knock out the other teams pretty much. There's just really no way. I mean, the only I think the only way, to tell you the truth, I don't think there's any chance for Penn State and Michigan State to get in because Ohio State would have to lose to Illinois. Okay, so they're out. The only way Ohio State doesn't get in is if Michigan beats Wisconsin, then beats Ohio State, and then Michigan State and Penn State lose once. And trust me, they probably won't. And you know what? That's actually more likely than Ohio State losing to Illinois. It is. So that's why Ohio State's going to go to the Big Ten championship game. But the only question is, Will they go in on a roll, beating Michigan, or will they go in, say, losing to Michigan, and then it's really ugly? Which, who knows? It might actually work out for Wisconsin either way, because maybe Ohio State would be so banged up emotionally, psychologically, that Wisconsin will go get them. But I think Wisconsin is legit. They proved that with their defense. 5 first downs for Iowa and 66 total yards. Ouch. So I'm going to go with that. Now, who am I going to have in the SEC championship? That is a different story. Again, I'm going to go with the Auburn Georgia SEC championship game winner right now. It's way too early for me to pick that. I need to see more Georgia. I need to see this quarterback situation play out, and let me see the Auburn game. Let me see how that game goes with Alabama. I still like Auburn to beat Alabama. I'll say that much. It doesn't happen often, especially lately. But I think this is the perfect time. They're at an all-time high confidence-wise right now this season. The defense is playing fantastic. Stidham actually thinks he can do something. And again, I think that's just a part of them being able to run the ball a little bit. And that is also going to depend on Alabama's health, like I said. We'll find out in a couple of weeks. Now, I'm leaning towards Auburn right now. But let me see about Alabama's health in a couple of weeks. We'll talk more about that. And we'll make a call there. But based on what I saw, just because of what was on the field for Alabama yesterday, 2 days ago, I would go with Auburn in that game right now. All right, so that's the scenario. We've given you the scenarios. Wisconsin, they're going to, again, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Big Ten championship game. We know that's pretty much going to happen. You know the SEC scenario now. You know the Big 12. You know the ACC. The Pac-12. USC is already in the Pac-12 championship game. By the way, they have UCLA this week. We're going to talk. We have a guest talking USC football later in the week. Now, who will they play? If Washington State beats Washington in the Apple Cup in 2 weeks, Washington State and USC in a rematch. If Washington beats Washington State in 2 weeks, okay, that now opens the door for Stanford, which we'll know by then because Stanford plays Cal this week. So if Stanford beats Cal this week in the big game rivalry, then it's simple. Washington beats Washington State. Stanford's in the championship game. Washington State beats Washington. Washington State's in. But first we got to see Stanford beating Cal. All right. And by the way, if Washington were to lose to Utah, then all of a sudden things get a little bit more muddled. But let's just go with the things that we're expecting. Washington's going to beat Utah, and we're expecting Stanford to beat Cal, especially Bryce Love had another huge game, and Stanford's starting to look really good right now. So if what we expect happens this week, Stanford wins and Washington wins, then there you go. Washington State beats Washington, they're in. Washington beats Washington State, it's Stanford, and they will play USC. All right, now in the Mountain West Conference, Boise had a come-from-behind miraculous win. It was the first game that I've seen all season where a team actually trailing the game, got the onside kick, and then came down and scored. Because I haven't seen many onside kicks work at all this year. So that was one of the few onside kicks I've seen that worked at all this season. Not only does it work, but Boise scores a touchdown, forces overtime, and beats Colorado State in overtime. So Boise State beats Air Force this week. They're in the championship game. And Fresno State, who, by the way, plays Boise in a couple of weeks, Fresno State, if they beat either Wyoming away this week, which I don't think they're going to, because we've been riding Wyoming now the last couple of weeks, and all of a sudden, Josh Allen has got this team playing well, and his stock is going to probably start slowly going back up again after a very slow, bad start to the year for him. And we know we've chronicled all that, of course, most of the season. But anyway, if Wyoming does beat Fresno State this week, then Fresno would have to beat Boise at home the next week. Remember, we talked about this last week. What does Boise do? Does it psychologically impact them at all in any way? Where if they beat Air Force this week and they're already in the championship game and they're basically playing for nothing. I mean, they may be playing, I guess. It's possible for a group of 5. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, but it's possible, even though Central Florida has been kind of cruising in that role for a while now. But let's just say they're playing for nothing. then what happens? They're on the road. They're playing for nothing. Do they rest their guys? Make sure that, hey, we'll play Fresno next week. We're not going to show them a game plan just in case, so why even try to show them our game plan? What if we lose with a game plan? So they might just not show a game plan, rest players, and Fresno beats them anyway. But that's not. Those are two tough games for Fresno, and you only have to win one of them. So, but if they lose both, then San Diego State has to win their last two against Nevada and New Mexico, both at home, which they probably will, which makes things interesting there. So still unknown if we're going to get a Boise State, Fresno State Mountain West Championship. And speaking of Central Florida, the AAC, it's still going to come down to Central Florida and South Florida. By the way, don't worry about this game this week. If South Florida beats Tulsa on Thursday, the Central Florida Temple game on Saturday would only matter for the group of 5. That's it. Because if as long as South Florida beats Tulsa Thursday, which they probably will, even if Central Florida loses to Temple, the South Florida game will decide who wins the division. So it means nothing. Central Florida could be up a game or tied with South Florida. It will mean nothing because the winner will hold head-to-head either way. So that's why it would only matter for group of 5, because Central Florida would want to make sure, of course, that they're undefeated, which would easily give them that bid. Now, if we still believe Central Florida is going to win it, we've believed it all season since opening day. We said it was going to come down to that game, and we liked Central Florida. We still hold to that, even though I do think that Temple game could be, interesting. Now, the winner would face probably Memphis in the AAC championship game. If Memphis beats both SMU and East Carolina, they're in, and they've been playing really well. I expect them to do that. So it's the UCF USF champion against Memphis in the AAC championship. So in the Conference USA, if FAU wins one of their last two, rival FIU this week or at Charlotte, which they will because they've been rocking. We've been behind them, as you know, for the past 3 weeks. We had our guest on. We talked about FAU about their season. Since then, they haven't lost. They've been playing great under Lane Kiffin. So they're going to be in a Conference USA championship game and most likely face North Texas, because all North Texas has to do is beat Rice in 2 weeks, even though it is away, but beat Rice in 2 weeks, and North Texas will play FAU in the championship game. By the way, North Texas will play Army this week in the meantime in a non-conference game. Should be a good game. Those are two pretty good teams facing off against each other. And in the MAC, Toledo, if they beat Bowling Green and Western Michigan, they will play in the championship game in a rematch with Ohio, who just beat them up last week. But that's only if Ohio beats Akron tomorrow night. Now, get this. If Ohio loses at Akron tomorrow night, Akron will win the division when they beat Kent State next week, because everybody beats Kent State. So the game tomorrow night, Ohio and Akron, is really the last big MAC regular season game of the season. So you want to watch that tomorrow night. Ohio at Akron, Tommy Bowden zips against Ohio. Now, Ohio's a better team, and I see no reason to think they're going to lose the game. But stranger things have happened in college football, so keep in mind, if Akron wins the game and then they beat Kent State, Akron will win the division. But right now it's looking like a Toledo-Ohio rematch. All right, so that's how it's all looking right now in college. Of course, Butch Jones is finally out at Tennessee. Who could have predicted that? We did. Actually, last year we did. So, but Brady Hoke? I mean, please somebody tell me they gave him the interim role. Please somebody tell me that. There is no possible way Tennessee is hiring Brady Hoke to take over the Tennessee program. There's just no way. I can't imagine that. I will not imagine that. I cannot imagine that for Tennessee fans. So I'm not going to go there. It's got to be interim. Got to be interim. Has to be. Oh, by the way, a couple other things from college. I don't know who made the play calling, either Tom Manning or Matt Campbell, and we praise Matt Campbell, and he should be praised big time. We love Matt Campbell at Iowa State. But the play calling at the end of the Iowa State-Oklahoma State was a sin. Twice they screwed up. Once got away with it. Second time they didn't. They're trailing the game by 7. Their starting quarterback is out, Kyle Kempt. They've got this red shirt kid Nolan playing. And he's doing a good enough job. I mean, they're marching down the field, and you don't screw around with a good thing, right? Not necessarily because he's playing well, but just, hey, he's playing well enough. Don't put it all on his shoulders. So they get down to, I think it was like the 10-yard line. And I believe it was like, I don't know, 2nd and 3 or something. And they have this really good running back, David Montgomery, the sophomore running back, who's going to be a really good player to keep an eye on in the next couple of years. He's only a sophomore. And and there was enough time on the clock, like a minute. So much time left on the clock at that point. I'm going, all right, you got to hand off. Got to hand it off here. You hand it off here, and because this kid is playing great. You hand it off, and this kid's definitely going to find a way to get a first down. No doubt in my mind. They passed the ball. And I forget what it was. I think it was, I don't know if he got sacked. I think maybe the first play they threw the ball was incomplete maybe. And then it was 3rd and 3, and I was like, you got to run the ball again, right? Because you're going to go for it anyone 4th. Run the ball. You have to run the ball. You got to get the ball in this guy's hands. They went for a pass play again. He gets sacked. They went like back-to-back passing plays when they could have handed the ball off to this kid on a short yardage situation. He gets sacked. Now it's 4th and like 14. And you're going, you just screwed up the game with those terrible calls. So what does Nolan do? He throws the ball to Montgomery on like a 7-yard pass. And he makes a couple of great moves and picks up the first down. All right. And then what do they do? He got the ball down to like whatever it was, the 5 or the 4-yard line, 3-yard line maybe. Again, more than enough time left, like 40 seconds. What does he do? He calls a pass play. Matter of fact, he calls 2 pass plays. The first one didn't work. And then I'm going, I can't believe he did that. He didn't learn his lesson. Please run the ball here. He calls another pass play. He gets picked off. I mean, the play calling at the end of that game was terrible. You do not have an elite quarterback in that situation. You did not have 10 seconds left in the game. You had all the cards were on the table to run the ball, even just once to Montgomery, and every time they threw the ball. Terrible. One of the worst play calling sequences of the season for me. And lastly, congratulations to Dave Clausen and Wake Forest. What a fantastic, this team is like, now the only bad thing is John Wolford's going to leave, but watch out for Wake. I'm definitely taking them against North Carolina State this week. You know, it's a bummer, too, because it's North Carolina State. Remember, I mean, I told you I was a flip of a coin with Boston College, and that was tough. And, I mean, it winded up as a push, but they needed a big stop at the end, North Carolina State, to win the game. But here we go, North Carolina State again against Wake. But I don't care. I mean, I just love the way Wake is playing right now. I mean, Dave Clausen is doing a phenomenal job with this team. Now, I hope that, you know, this Kendall Hinton kid can take over next year, and I hope he can do a good job. But I tell you what, I think Wake's going to win these next 2 home games, and I hope they play a team that they can, you know, like a 2-point pick'em bowl game. I'll be taking them there too. I love the way they're playing right now. I mean, remember when we were like, wow, I mean, how did they move the ball so well against Notre Dame? And we were kind of thinking, oh, Notre Dame is looking ahead, and this team is rocking right now with that offense. And they already have a pretty good defense. 734 yards of total offense. John Wolford had 3 touchdowns passing and 3 touchdowns rushing. Matt Colburn had 237 yards rushing. They are smoking right now. And Dave Clausen, who did a great job building up the Bowling Green program in the glory days of Bowling Green, is doing it at Wake. Good for him. Good for him. Try to see if we can get someone on from Wake this week, too. Good for them. They're your props. My Wake Forest props. All right. So what do we got this week? Quickly in the SEC. By the way, this is one of those weeks where you're going to get these weird games like Alabama and Mercer, something like that. So there are going to be some of those weird games. So just keep that in mind. Let's see here. What do we got? Here's a game that I'm definitely looking forward to taking. Auburn, UAB, the Blazers, baby. They pull off another upset. Boy, they just keep pulling off these upsets for us at Florida. And we've jumped all over Missouri and South Carolina the last 2 weeks, so we're jumping on them again. UAB at Florida. They're only a 10-point dog. That kind of does scare me, though. And Missouri. Speaking of Missouri, love the way Missouri's playing right now. Remember we talked about that last week? Told you about Odom. He's got that team rocking. Look out for Missouri. Let's see. They're at Vanderbilt, by the way, so they should have no problem there. Of course, the Wisconsin-Michigan game is the big one in the Big Ten. ACC, Virginia-Miami. You never know if that game will be close. Shouldn't be. Miami should win that game pretty easily. Let's see. Big 12, the TCU-Texas Tech game is going to be big. West Virginia still has a mathematical chance at the Big 12 championship game, but they got to beat Texas first at home, so that's an important game. And Kansas State at Oklahoma State is also an important game in the Big 12 this week. What else? The big rivalry, UCLA-USC in the Pac-12. Again, we're going to have on a USC guest coming up in the next couple of days to talk about that. By the way, Dan Shanka tomorrow at 4 o'clock on the Ourlads, on the OFN scouting section. He's going to break down both Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen before the UCLA-USC game. Cal Stanford, the game, also coming up later this week in the Pac-12. We told you the Fresno-Wyoming game in the Mountain West. That's the big game there. Of course, Air Force Boise for Boise to clinch in the AAC. I told you Central Florida Temple. I think that's going to be a good game. Temple's getting 14 in that one. Navy Notre Dame. Maybe a little luster's been blown off, but you know what? Maybe that's even better for Navy. That might be a ripe upset there because Notre Dame's got to be feeling pretty, done. There ain't no championship game in the Independence. Conference USA, again, that Army North Texas game could be pretty good. We told you FIU what that means. In the MAC, we told you the big game is tomorrow, Ohio and Akron. And in the Sun Belt, there's really too many games left to even talk about a championship situation there, and too many teams tied at the top as well. And really no big games this week either. So that's it for the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN, and go to Ourlads.com for the best depth charts in the industry for both the NFL and college football. We'll see you again. We got the scouting section tomorrow. We'll be back also with interviews this week on the meeting room. Tony Mejia Thursday to preview the NFL Week 11. I'll preview Week 12 of college football on Friday, and we'll have our fantasy football game day coverage on Sunday morning. So thanks for tuning in to more Ourlads Football Radio Network coverage here, brought to you by Prime Sports Network. And we'll see you again later on down the road. Still a lot of great football ahead of us, including this week. It's only Monday. We'll see you next time.